The tension in the room was so thick it felt hard to breathe. The old clock on the wall ticked steadily, as if counting the slow unraveling of the family that once filled this house with warmth. And then, suddenly, a voice pierced the silence. "Your mother didn't hold back. Give us the 5 million she left, and we'll leave." The words were venomous, a poison born of years of frustration, jealousy, and greed. It wasn't a stranger yelling. It was Svetlana, Lyra's mother-in-law. She and her son, Kirill, had long maintained a tense, fragile relationship with Lyra, but the moment Lyra's mother passed and it became known that she had left 5 million rubles to her daughter, the cracks in their family foundation widened. To Lyra, the money wasn't just wealth. It was her mother's last act of care, a chance to rebuild her life. But now, those she was supposed to trust came demanding it, as if the world owed them. Mother didn't hold back. Lyra's mind echoed. The woman had been her support, helping them when Kirill struggled to find work, buying clothes and medicine for her child, welcoming them into the home with open arms. And now, in one cruel sentence, it was reduced to a lie of greed. Svetlana stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disdain and triumph. She wanted to see Lyra humiliated. "Do you think you're special? That your mother was rich? Everything she had belongs to Kirill's family," she spat, deliberately emphasizing Kirill's family, as if Lyra were an outsider. On the floor between them stood a porcelain vase, a keepsake of Lyra's mother. The delicate blue flowers on the white porcelain seemed almost sacred. But Svetlana's eyes caught it, gleamed, and in one swift motion, she knocked it to the floor. The vase shattered into hundreds of shards. The sound was more than just noise. It was symbolic. Everything connecting Lyra to her past, to her mother, to peace, lay in pieces. Kirill stood frozen in the doorway. Once tall and confident, he now seemed paralyzed. He didn't know which side to take. On one hand, his wife, who had lived with him for 7 years and given him a son. On the other, his mother, who had raised him, instilled a sense of duty, and taught him that family came first. Now, he felt lost. Lyra's hands trembled. "My mother left this money for me," she said softly, almost whispering. "She wanted me to start over." Her words were sincere, though quiet. Svetlana only laughed, harsh and guttural. "Start over. You couldn't even manage before. We helped you when you had nothing. And now you're rich. Do you think money will save you? Give it back before it's too late." Kirill wanted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He saw in his mother's eyes the woman he had feared as a child, commanding, relentless. Even now, looking at his wife, he felt like a traitor if he didn't side with his mother. Deep down, though, he knew this was wrong. That money wasn't theirs. It was his mother-in-law's last gift to her daughter. Lyra looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Say something, Kirill," she whispered. "This isn't right." Silence stretched on. Svetlana opened her mouth to shout again, but Kirill finally stepped forward. "Enough, Mom," he said, voice shaking but firm. "This money isn't yours. It isn't mine. It belongs to Lyra." "What?" His mother looked as if she couldn't comprehend him. "Against your own mother." "I'm for fairness," he breathed. "You don't understand. She's gone. And right now, you're just—" He didn't finish. Words seemed useless. The silence that followed felt eternal. Svetlana stared at her son, her eyes a mix of pain and scorn. Then, suddenly, she spun around, grabbed her bag, and left, slamming the door so hard the window trembled in its frame. The house fell silent again. But it wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of emptiness, of words said that couldn't be unsaid. Lyra stood amidst the shards of the vase. The blue and white pieces glittered on the carpet, like frozen tears. She knelt, running her hand over the fragments, not noticing the small cut she made on her finger. A drop of blood fell on the porcelain, a tiny red mark, alive, like a memory. "All over," she whispered. But strangely, she didn't feel despair. There was a sense of release. For years, Lyra had lived under the shadow of other people's demands. Her mother-in-law's constant control, Kirill's silence, the house that felt like a prison. Now, freedom was within reach, and it had to be seized. The 5 million rubles were more than just money. They were a symbol, a chance her mother had given her to start anew. Lyra knew she wouldn't give them up. Kirill approached cautiously, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have told them no sooner." "The important thing is that you said it now," Lyra replied. "Everything else, we'll handle later." He nodded. Together, they stood silently by the window, watching the rain fall outside. The storm raged, but inside, for the first time in a long time, there was calm. No shouting, no lies, no poison. Only memory, courage, and a new beginning. After the mother-in-law left, the house fell into silence. But it wasn't a simple silence. It was a space Lyra had never known, where her voice, her will, finally mattered. On the kitchen floor lay the shattered pieces of the vase, a reminder of how easily the past could destroy everything around it. But instead of panic, Lyra felt a strange relief. For the first time in years, she didn't feel guilt, fear, or dependence on someone else's opinion. Kirill sat nearby, head lowered. His shoulders were tense, and his gaze drifted over the floor, as if searching for the right words he didn't yet know. Lyra watched him carefully. She knew he wasn't her enemy, but he wasn't yet her ally either. He stood at a crossroads between the old world, where he obeyed his mother unquestioningly, and the new world, where he had to stand beside his wife. "Kirill," she began softly, "we need to decide what to do with this money. It's partly yours, partly mine, but first and foremost, it's mine, because my mother wanted me to have it." Kirill lifted his eyes, revealing a mixture of fear, guilt, and confusion. He understood that if he gave the money to his mother, he could never justify it. But he also felt the weight of years of family expectations and duty. "I understand," he said finally, "but we need to be careful. Mom always wanted us to stay together, as a family. I don't want there to be fights between us." Lyra sighed. She knew his words were sincere, but sincerity was not a solution. The fight had already happened. The question now was how to act next. She understood that if she simply handed over the money, she would lose not only her mother's inheritance but also part of herself. This money represented her independence, a chance to start a life free from the control of others. Her thoughts drifted back to her mother's words, "Never let others control your fate. Money is a tool, not the goal." Now, those words were a roadmap. Lyra understood she had to make her own decisions. Her first act was cleaning up the shards of the vase. The process was slow, painful, but symbolic. Each piece she lifted represented her acceptance of the past, her grief, and her readiness to move forward. With the broken pieces, fear, anxiety, and helplessness left with them, Kirill watched. It was hard for him to witness her independence. He had always been the protector, but now that role was dissolving. For the first time in years, he felt like a partner, not a son. After the cleanup, Lyra sat at the table and opened her mother's documents, letters, notes, financial records. The money she had received wasn't random. Her mother had carefully prepared it for her. Lyra felt the guidance of her mother even after death, directing her. She resolved to act as her mother would have wanted. The first step was planning how to use the inheritance. Lyra knew simply storing the money wouldn't help. Part of it would go to rebuilding the house destroyed by fire, a promise to herself and to her mother. The house was a symbol of family, warmth, and memory, and restoring it was both a physical and emotional act. The second step was securing her son's future. Lyra decided that the money should work for him, not vanish in unnecessary expenses. She considered investments, banks, long-term financial safety. Every decision was deliberate, giving her a sense of control over her life. The third step was emotional liberation. Lyra resolved never again to let Kirill's family dictate her life. The past couldn't be changed, but the present could be managed. She prepared herself for future conflicts, disputes, or manipulations, legally, emotionally, and mentally. These decisions weren't easy. Doubts crept in. Am I being selfish? Will this destroy relationships? But each time she remembered her mother's advice about independence, the doubts dissipated. Lyra realized that real care for family wasn't obedience, but making choices that preserved dignity and security. Simultaneously, she worked on her emotional healing. She wrote in a journal, recording thoughts and feelings, learning to release anger and resentment. Each entry was a ritual of cleansing, allowing herself to feel without hiding or suppressing. Gradually, Lyra realized that money was only a tool. What mattered more were relationships, trust, and the ability to be strong without depending on others. Her mother had given her more than financial resources. She had given her guidance and faith in her strength. Kirill began to engage more actively. He suggested ideas for investments and ways to protect Lyra from further conflict with his mother. The discussions weren't always easy. Old resentments surfaced, and Kirill sometimes doubted himself. But together, they began to create a plan that offered both security and peace of mind. Inside Lyra, something had shifted. Fear was replaced with confidence. She remembered lessons from her childhood, moments when her mother had taught her independence. With every thought and action, she realized that her mother's inheritance wasn't just money. It was power, trust, and memory. Simultaneously, Lyra worked on her boundaries with Kirill's family. She understood that the past couldn't be changed, but she could manage the future. Her mother-in-law could no longer threaten her. Lyra now knew her rights. She prepared for any potential confrontation, confident in her ability to assert herself. These steps were challenging, but necessary. Lyra experienced moments of doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Yet her mother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that real freedom requires responsibility and courage. Through these practical measures, she also nurtured her emotional growth. Journaling, reflection, and deliberate decision-making helped her release past pain. Every step, every thoughtful choice reinforced her independence. Eventually, Lyra realized the inheritance's true meaning. It wasn't money, but a symbol of strength, memory, and trust. The shattered vase was behind her. Now, the documents, plans, and actions represented her new future, orderly, deliberate, and free from manipulation. Her relationship with Kirill evolved. He had once been passive, fearing conflict and seeking maternal approval. Through shared planning and observing Lyra's resolve, he began to change. The story showed that true love manifests as support, not control. Lyra's internal monologues, reflections on the inheritance, future, son, and home illustrate her psychological transformation. She moved from victimhood to an active agent in her life. By the end, the story transitions into a new life phase. Lyra and Kirill not only plan how to use the money but also build an emotional foundation for equality and respect. Her mother's gift extended beyond financial security. It provided guidance, freedom, and the ability to act independently.